Welcome to HR Studio Podcast. Through bi-weekly interviews with HR executives, thought leaders, authors, speakers, and trend spotters from the world of HR and beyond, we invite you to listen, learn, and leverage. Welcome to HR Studio Podcast, building the next generation of HR leaders. HR Studio Podcast is brought to you by A.J. O'Connor Associates, a trusted human capital consulting partner to emerging, mid-market, and world-class organizations. To learn more, visit us at ajoconnor.com.
Well, welcome to HR Studio Podcast. My name is Fred Bunsa, and I am your host for today's episode. Today, we are rejoined by a previous guest, Dana Wright Wasson, who has been on the podcast before, and we had such a good response. We asked her to come back. And believe it or not, she agreed. So we are thrilled with that. She wrote a book called We've Got to Start Meeting Like This, creating inspiring meetings, conferences, and events, and also a little mini version to meet or not to meet, 10 tips for practically perfect meetings. And we wanted to talk about that with our HR audience because we are responsible for so many meetings. And it's oftentimes a way we can really help our line leaders do better with driving better meetings. And just a little bit of background on Dana. For those of you who didn't hear in our previous podcast, she's a global OD consultant who leads clients through transformational processes around strategic planning, employee engagement, and leadership. She's really passionate about creating employee experiences, and she believes that engagement is an outcome and it's an effect of the way people are treated in organizations. She's written a couple of books. Her most recent book is called Talk the Walk, but she's also written the books I've pointed out. We've Got to Start Meeting Like This, and actually has an upcoming book where she's doing a few chapters called The Visual Facilitation Field Guide. Is that right, Dana? Did I get it right?
Or they're changing the title. Who knows?
Awesome.
It's coming out in July, one way or another.
She is the CEO of Take Action, and she's also the founder of the Work Happy Project. So maybe better meetings can equal happier work. Dana, welcome back to HR Studio Podcast.
Thanks for having me back.
So this topic of meetings, people's calendars are filled with them. It can make us crazy. They can get in the way of us actually doing good work. There's a lot of negative things that swirl around meetings. I think Patrick Lencioni wrote that book, Death by Meeting. So you're stepping into this space saying, actually, this doesn't have to be this way. And particularly HR leaders in particular could play a pretty significant role in helping their line leaders run better meetings. So welcome back, and tell us a little bit about your ideas around this idea of better meetings.
Well, I mean, obviously, yes, people are drowning in meetings. It's hard to get appointments with people because they're going from meeting to meeting, almost like a very packed school day, right? From
Yes.
passing hall time to one meeting to another, barely getting time to eat or drink or anything. And it's funny, the first book I wrote on the way back from a meeting. I was in Chicago and I was at a meeting that was, surprise, surprise, not run very well. I had not organized it. And I thought, it doesn't have to be this way. And I opened my computer on the way home. I was flying back to San Jose. And I started outlining the things that I thought were pretty obvious to me. And before I knew it, the flight attendant was saying, it's time to land, put your computer away. And I looked down and I thought, oh, I didn't mean to do that. And shared it with a friend. And she said, oh my gosh, she had worked in many companies. And she said, you've got to write this book. And I said, oh my gosh, because it really wasn't the book I was trying to write. But it was pretty easy to write because for me, it's very easy to have good meetings. It just takes some time and some planning, but it's an absolutely amazing opportunity to create engagement with people, to really get people bonded on a topic. People come to conferences and events because they really want to learn something and they want to meet people. And it's pretty easy if you put a little bit of effort into it to meet those goals and many others.
So so let's talk about what I thought would be the angle I'd like to go at this from is let's presume that we've got HR leaders who are working with line leaders that they're supporting as an HR business partner. And let's assume that line leader isn't the greatest in how they run his or her meetings. and we want to bring value, increase engagement, be more productive, achieve the business objectives. As HR leaders, we want to drive those business objectives. What could we do to partner with that leader? What are some practical things we can do if we thought just having better meetings would be a great place to start?
Right. Well, I think there's a couple of things you can do. I mean, any good party starts with a good plan, right? A very smooth party is because of a lot of hard work and planning up front. And I don't even think it has to be that hard of work, but it does take a little bit more effort than just sending off an email telling people a time and a place. So it requires thinking about what your objective is or what your outcome is. So is it a regular team meeting that you're having, or is it a project team kickoff meeting? Thinking about the type of meeting and what the objective is going to be. Is it trying to set the vision, or is it trying to get an update for the week of what everybody has on their calendar, what they've accomplished? Those are two different types of goals. But you have to put a little time into it, right? Into thinking about that objective. And then you have to think about who are the right people given that objective to be in that meeting. So many people use meetings as a party invitation, and they invite everybody thinking that it's an honor to be invited, when lots of people I've talked to, they get to a meeting and they have no idea why they're there. That's not a good use of anybody's time.
Yeah. But they feel sort of there might be politics about why they get invited, or just because the org chart says that they're in the way of this, or they're connected to this topic, but they may not actually have anything to contribute.
Exactly. And so then you just have
outcome, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And the organization has to break their pattern of behavior of just inviting people because it's a CYA activity rather than a contributory activity. There's lots of ways that I can inform you about the outcome of my meeting that doesn't involve you having to actually physically be there.
Okay.
That's a better use of your time, and frankly, it's a better use of the people in the meeting's time.
Okay, so start by plan this through. What's the outcome that the meeting is driving towards,
right,
and shooting for? And then who are the people that need to be in the room or on the phone or connected that would help get to that outcome?
Exactly. And you could brainstorm a total list and figure out, one by one, as you were saying, are those people that need to actually be in the room, or do they need to be informed later of the outcome, or do we need input from them to go into the meeting? But you can sort out a lot of people that way rather than just inviting them all.
Okay, good.
It just takes a minute more of time to do that sort of process rather than just putting them on an email list.
So we got outcome, we got list of invitees. Yeah. What would be another step in creating more impactful meetings?
Really thinking about what needs to be on the agenda. So what are the action items, or not action items, that's at the end, but what are the agenda items that we need to cover? And then linked to that, obviously, is how much time is that going to take? So realistically, if we're going to have that type of an agenda, and thinking through about how much time we need for each item to cover, how much total time is that going to be?
Okay. So
thinking through that. And one of the big questions that companies often ask is, do we need to do this on-site, or should it be an off-site meeting? An off-site meeting is more productive because you get people out of their physical space and their distractions. But most in-house meetings are not that type of meeting. They're things where you can, take care of it in the course of a day.
Okay. Are there any, do you have any guidelines for folks of when not to have a meeting? This is not meeting, the outcome is important, but it's not meeting worthy.
Time of day, Fred?
Are there any topics that you would say this is not worthy of a meeting? We don't need to have a meeting on this topic.
Yes. Well, thinking about what's the outcome that you're hoping for each one of those agenda items. So is it a decision that you need to make? Is it input that you need to get? So if there's a topic that doesn't require other people, or if there's a way to handle it, like if it's just between you and I, then that doesn't need to be in a meeting with 10 other people.
Okay. I've heard one organization say that they don't have meetings to convey information. That they only have meetings to make decisions, to give input, to collect data.
Right.
But if it's a meeting just to kind of fill people in, they choose to do that consciously in other ways that don't require a meeting. Do you have an opinion on that?
I think that's a great idea. And there's so many other ways to do that. I think of, PowerPoint has really made presenters dumb down their presentation skills. Mm-hmm. So if you can put it on a PowerPoint slide and hand it around, then that's probably not a speaker-worthy topic. Same with a meeting. If you can put it onto a Word doc or send it in an email or some sort of a document and people can read it and get the information they need, then unless they need to decide something from that or have some discussion, then that's a great elimination of something that doesn't need to be met about.
Yeah. So maybe one key takeaway is if our audience can just help people have fewer meetings, even if they don't run the current meetings better, but they can just eliminate 1 or 2 meetings a week from people's calendars, the productivity time, 45 minutes times 8 or 9 people is a significant chunk of productivity that can be freed up.
Yes, exactly. And thinking about going back to your list of attendees, there's a kind of a plus or minus of how many people you should have in a meeting, right? So going back to that party invitation concept, the rule of thumb always was 7 plus or minus 2. And Jeff Bezos from Amazon takes it a step further and he says, any meeting that you can't feed everyone in the room with 2 pizzas is too big.
It's too big of I have heard that as a rule of thumb.
Yes.
16 slices or less.
Right.
The time required to cover a topic. I can't tell you how many meetings I've been in. I'm sure our subscribers and listeners have the same thing. You say, "Oh, that's a pretty simple topic. Let's just do it in 10 minutes," and a huge conversation breaks out.
Yes.
How do you even account for that? Because it seems like no matter what the topic is, it can be covered in 10 minutes or in an hour.
Yes. Well, there's a really important role for meeting role players. Long story short, if you have somebody who's monitoring the time in the meeting, having that role, then they can call it, and the team should know probably if they're working together on a regular basis, what topics tend to need more time, and going back and kind of assessing and saying, do we keep shortchanging our agenda topics? Like, are we not allotting enough time? But if that timekeeper in the scenario you suggested, at the end of, say, 10 minutes, they say, we're still talking about this and we've used our time allotted. What do you want to do? And you put the choice onto the team. So the team starts to learn how to run their own meetings better. So it doesn't become the responsibility of the leader. It doesn't become the responsibility of one person in the room. It's the whole team learning to manage their time better.
Okay.
And they can make that decision at that point. Do we want to add more time, or do we want to put this on our next agenda and have a further conversation, maybe a lot more time because of the conversation that needs to happen?
Okay. So some shared leadership around the table.
Yes.
Is what I hear you advocating for. Are there other roles besides timekeeper that you would say, you're well served by identifying those roles?
Yes, I think that there's a really important role for somebody taking the role of scribe. And I'm an advocate as a visual practitioner of making that a big picture rather than someone writing down a little notepad. I'm always suspicious of somebody writing on a notepad what they're writing. And was it really our group memory or was it their memory?
Yes. Okay.
So it's really nice, as simple as a flip chart, to be able to capture either action items or parking lot issues, whatever it is, but capturing it in front of the room so that we can make sure that the whole group agrees that that's what we've decided, rather than having one person take notes and then they get type stealth in the background afterwards.
Okay.
So,
yeah. Okay. So timekeeper, scribe. Yep. Any others that you suggest, or just those?
Depending on the topic and the way that the team runs, if the leader can be a facilitator and help move things along on the agenda, if they were the person who developed it. Some topics, honestly, they really need a dedicated facilitator so that the leader can participate in the conversation.
Yeah.
So if the leader is trying to be part of the team and have part of the conversation be be owned by them. It's hard to play both hats. You have to be pretty experienced to be able to do that. So bringing somebody in, whether it's from HR, it's another team leader, it's a great learning opportunity for somebody in the organization to be that neutral facilitator.
Yeah, it can be a great way to as a training, as a development thing for a high potential, or the role of the HR leader in that space. If they don't want to, if it's not necessary for them to sit around the table as a member of the team, they can often serve the meeting by being that skilled facilitator.
Exactly. And they really add value to the team by doing that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've got outcome, we've got people to invite, we've got the agenda, we've got roles.
Yes.
What else makes for a much more productive, engaging meeting?
I think being very clear at the end about what are our actions. So what did we agree upon in this time? So I think of it as who does what by when, right? And we actually chart that. We agree what, and that can be charted by the scribe throughout the meeting or just at the end where we collectively put down what we thought we heard and we agreed to. But it has not just the what, but it has the who's going to do it and by when are they going to do it.
Okay.
Because then there's actually an owner or owners. There can be multiple people responsible. And we know we're going to have it done by either the next meeting or some other set time that we all have agreed upon, that we all see visibly.
Okay. Excellent. And are you, I don't know, do you have an opinion on sort of sending out meeting notes, or how do you communicate and with whom after the meeting's over?
Yes. Well, I think you go back to that list of who wasn't invited but needs to be informed and figure out how you get that information out to them. I'm a big fan of the flip chart idea, and then you can do with your smartphone, take a picture using some software like Turbo Scan or whatever. It actually just takes a picture of the chart that you have, and you can drop it into a Word doc or a PowerPoint doc and put a little bit of annotation of text of what that picture meant and send it out as notes to people. So there's not really a need to retype things anymore. Just getting the information out is a really great way to keep people in the loop, to keep them informed and engaged, and to communicate with them the progress. So if you're working on a project team, for example, it's a great way to keep your sponsor in the loop of what's happening, to keep other teams that you may be working with or interacting with, get them on board of what's going on.
Awesome. Okay. Are there any things to be cautious around in terms of meetings? Any things that you see typically will derail a meeting? I know if you're working from an agenda, people have roles. Those are some things that'll be very helpful. But I don't know. Are there any other guidelines that you tend to suggest around meeting length? Can we really meet for 2 hours, or is that too long? I don't know if you have suggestions like that.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things that people don't think about. So if you think about the topic, how fresh do you need people to be? So do you need them, is first thing in the morning going to be your best time of day, or is working over lunch going to be a better time, or is end of day going to be the best way to catch people and their ideas, because they've gotten all their work done? So just giving some thought to that. I also think that the length of time really depends on that agenda and how deep you need to get into those topics. So sometimes, I remember working in HR, we did a stand-up meeting once a week. And stand-up meeting meant you could do it for about 15, 20 minutes. And it was more of a check-in around the room.
Yep.
But you couldn't make a lot of decisions that way, right? That was kind of information popcorning. But doing a meeting, probably, I don't think you can really get anything done in less than an hour. And depending on your topic, half day seems to be the maximum that organizations are able to do anything that doesn't require doing an offsite and more, more logistics involved.
Okay. And then one last area, Dana, I want to ask you about is rules. There's usually some ways of working or rules that are often facilitate, people being heard and decisions being made. Do you have any, any recommendations around the kinds of general rules a team would want to implement to be productive?
Yes, absolutely. I actually put a list in the little book that you mentioned. because I think people get kind of uncertain. It's always funny when I go into a group and I say, so what ground rules will we need to be productive? And I get blank stares and I'm thinking, don't you use these already? But I think people have to, what I love to do as an external facilitator, so I'm the outside person that gets brought in when the whole team wants to participate.
Right.
And what I love is if I work with them over time, I love to develop those operating principles, those ground rules for them to work, and then have them become accountable to them themselves. So in other words, I love when there's a transition when we develop these rules. These are things like, one idea at a time, no idea is a bad idea, don't shoot the messenger, things like that. So it's letting ideas pop up. And what I love is when I don't have to call people on breaking a ground rule, when the team actually starts self-monitoring that, then it's, to me as a facilitator, it feels like a win because it feels like they are embracing their own rules as opposed to me being the outside policeman. Because we all know when mom goes away, everybody's going to regress back to how they were.
That's right.
We're kind of taking it on.
Yep. That's good. Yeah. I mean, so you come in with some rules that work, but it's getting the team to see how these can benefit them. And then they're the ones who actually say, we're going to build these in as the normal part of our meeting process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And typically if it's a team that's ongoing, they know where they run astray, right? They know that they can do this. And so that's bad behavior that they need to put on the table for themselves.
Yeah. Actually, it just occurred to me, one of the ways that you might, we can help teams is if they do know that they're susceptible to getting off track or going over time or interrupting one another, is before the meeting starts is have them come up with what's a rule or two that we can adopt that will help us not have our most common bad behavior.
Yes.
So they can assess their own need and they can assess a potential solution and self prescribe what's needed.
Exactly. I mean, I love when they'll say things like one conversation at a time or don't talk over others because they know that's what they're typically doing.
Yes.
And so when they put it down, it's almost a reminder to them to not do it. And because I'm writing it up in front of them, they have it in front of, it's not just words that somebody threw out, it actually becomes like a scroll of thou shalt not or thou shalt. And it's their own rules.
Well, Dana, as we wrap up our podcast, any final thoughts or advice for our audience of rising HR leaders and what they can do to help that line leader who might be struggling with running effective meetings to really use these meetings as an opportunity for better engagement?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key, right? I think that meetings are one of the built-in ways organizations have to engage their employees because meetings happen, as you said, all the time, all day long, into the evenings, before, breakfast. And it's one of those opportunities where because people are going so fast, what they do, their default tendency is to just have them and not put any planning into it, when actually it's an incredible opportunity to engage your employees, to listen to them and get their ideas, to recognize people. Those are two highly overlooked ways to create a better experience for employees. And if people do it right, they set the tone for a much different workplace than is typically happening. People are running from meeting to meeting. And another really, really easy win is don't schedule your meeting to think school again, right? So don't schedule your meeting to be an hour because obviously people probably had from 2 to 3 already as a meeting and your meeting's from 3 to 4 and they're going to run to a meeting from 4 to 5. Well, how do you magically appear in another room in 0 seconds, right?
Yes. Yep.
So if you can give them like 10 minutes in between, you schedule your meeting from 2 to 2:50, you've given them the gift of 10 minutes to like grab something to eat, maybe a sip of water, walk to another place, get their thoughts organized. What a gift that is. So if there's any way to design your agenda to do that, I promise you people will be so grateful.
That's a great idea. The 50-minute meeting and versus the 61-minute meeting.
Exactly. It sounds so much better, doesn't it? Aren't you much more likely to go to the 50-minute meeting?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yes.
Well, Dana Wright Wesson, thank you so much for joining us on our podcast today. For those of you who are subscribers, please check out the show notes where Dana's book is referenced. And for new subscribers, we're going to be giving away 2 copies of Dana's book. We've got to start meeting like this, and to meet or not to meet. So please subscribe to hrstudiopodcast.com, where you'll be entered into the contest. You'll also receive updates on our podcasts, and as I said, be able to see the show notes and all the social media handles that Dana has for herself. So Dana, on behalf of HR Studio Podcast, thank you so much for joining us once again on our podcast.
Thank you again for having me.
All right, have a great day.
You too.
Welcome to HR Studio Podcast. Through bi-weekly interviews with HR executives, thought leaders, authors, speakers, and trend spotters from the world of HR and beyond, we invite you to listen, learn, and leverage. Welcome to HR Studio Podcast, building the next generation of HR leaders. HR Studio Podcast is brought to you by A.J. O'Connor Associates, a trusted human capital consulting partner to emerging, mid-market, and world-class organizations. To learn more, visit us at ajoconnor.com.